What's going on, beautiful people? Today we're going to go over how to do video drone light painting to make something like this. So let's get started. Hey guys, it's Russ. I hope you're doing well. Before we go any further into this video, I highly recommend you watch my previous videos on drone light painting. They'll pop up at the top here. The reason is I'm not going to go as in depth in this video as I did in those, because this video would be like 25 minutes long, trying to avoid that. And of course, please like, comment, and subscribe and hit the bell notification for whenever I do new videos. So let's get into it. So you can see here that I have Spike as an overlay. And I chose Spike for a reason. Because all the other light paintings we've done have all been 99 waypoints. I wanted to do one that was over that so you guys can kind of see my process. And so what you're going to see is I've already planned all of these out. I have the collar, the head, and his face. And I did it that way for a reason because I already knew it was going to be over 99 waypoints. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to be over 99, how do I want to tell the story of how it's going to be made? So I thought if I did the collar first, and then his head, and then his face, that makes the most sense because now it feels complete as I'm building it. It's also important to note that when you have Google Earth open, make sure you have 3D buildings turned off so your overlays are flat, and turn the terrain on so that when you make 3D KMLs and put them back in here, it'll look good and it's going to just make sense. Just trust me, we'll get there. So I have all these points labeled out here. Now, it is important to note though that when I go through and do this, so I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I go all the way to the end of the collar, and then I'm going to go around. And if you see here in my notes, I go back on 20, I move to 21, which is down here, and then I come forward on 22. And then I bring this up, and I would end on 29 normally, but I'm adding in an extra point to make my drone go backwards and turn the light around, because when I am switching to the new programmed path for his head, I want to make sure that I don't have to worry about covering my lens. Before, that's what I would do so I wouldn't get any overexposure, or if we're doing a video, if it goes out of frame. And this way, you don't have to worry about it. The other benefit is that normally if you were to block your lens, you would lose star trails and there'd be a gap, but this way, you don't ever have to worry about a gap. So that's like a nice little extra bonus. But you have to use one extra waypoint, so it depends what you're doing. So now that we have this, we have everything planned out, right? So what you're going to do then is, so I'm actually going to right click, save place as, and we're going to make it a KML, and you're just going to save it to where you need it to. I've already done that with all of these. So next we're going to go to Litchi. We're going to import that mission, and there's waypoints here. Awesome. So now we have this mission here. Now, it's important to note that I have this one at the bottom here. And the reason that I do is you can see with everything else, I also have the 1 and the 2 and the 201 down here. The reason being is when we go to make this a vertical light painting, we need to make sure that we always start at 10 meters or whatever you want to start at, but you want to make sure each path starts at the same height, the same altitude. Otherwise, it's going to treat the first point that you put within that KML as its new altitude. And so I might start the collar and go up here, but that's going to take the head and it's going to make it at 10 meters. We don't want that. So that's why we have to do that to start. We have an easy solution. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and export this as a CSV. Then we're going to go into our vertical translator tool. And I will leave a link for this in the description below. You guys can have it, and I kind of walk you through the process and how it works. So first, File, Open in Playground mode. Then you're going to File, Save a copy in Drive, just so you don't have to come back to this link and deal with it. You can just have your own version. It's great. Then we're going to click on the play button. It's going to take a moment. I'm going to use the space bar to get down to the bottom. Choose files, and downloads. I'm going to grab this CSV. Now remember, when you export this file from Litchi, it always has to be facing north to start. If it's not facing north and you try to do this, it's going to mess it up, but it's not going to work. So first we're going to go 10 meters, and then we're going to make sure we go to a 90. And then this is where if you wanted to rotate it to not be north, this is where you would do it. And then if you wanted to change the latitude and longitude, you could, but we don't. So now we have spike right here. And I'm going to import it. Okay, so for this one, I know that I have certain points. So spike head 101, 102, forward 103. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, so I know, I'm going to bring this up. So 101, that's the one I start with, right? And I generally change my latitude in terms of 20s. And then I want to make sure this is at 180. And I'm going to go through each one. And I'm going to just go ahead and change it for when I want it to turn around. So I'm almost there. 180. Really should copy this. And we are at 76, yes. 180, and then lastly, when I turn it around, it's going to be my last points. Now that I've done this, so now we know where all of our points are and how it's all going to work. So now I don't need this one anymore that I started with because I've already set it as my base, but I don't want it to actually be there, so I'm just going to delete it. So now that's not my one anymore, and it's where I actually want it to be. Awesome. So now that I've done that, you can go ahead and save it. And if you want to check your work, go ahead and export as a KML 3D path. Just make sure you have your online elevation on. And as always, I recommend having a default curve size of 0%, making sure the path mode is on curve turns, and making sure your finish action is on none. So if we export this as a KML 3D path and open it in Google Earth, we'll see that we just have the head and we don't have this little extra line at the bottom there. Boom. And so that looks great. Now that we have our drone programmed, we're going to go out onto the field or into the city or wherever, and we're going to fly it. But there's a couple things that you should be aware of before you do a video drone light painting. First, we need to think about our environment. Are we going to be in a place with not a lot of ambient light, or with a place with a lot of ambient light? If you're going to be with a lot of ambient light, then you don't have to worry about your settings as much because you're going to see a lot of your environment. And it's going to look really cool, and you're just going to see it being created in the sky. But if you're doing this in a place with not any ambient light, things can get a little tougher. I say that because if there's not going to be a lot of ambient light, you're going to want to leave earlier, and you're only going to have one shot. I like to get out there at around late sunset, early blue hour. Let's go ahead and fly the drone. And you're going to want to make sure that you have a really bright light. So if normally I would use a Lume Cube strobe, but for this, I'm going to use a Lume Cube just because it can be that much brighter. And that's important for this because there's a lot of ambient light still out there because it's blue hour. There's a lot of daylight. So once you have that ready for either or, if you're doing it with a lot of ambient light in the city, you can go out whenever you want after dark because it'll look great. But now we should talk about our camera settings. So to start with ISO, generally just do what you think is best. Depending on where you are in blue hour, you might have to bump it up fairly high only because you're losing a lot of daylight and you want to still be able to see your environment if that's what you want. Next, of course, we have our f-stop. Generally, I just keep this as low as I can to let in as much light as possible. And then lastly, we have our shutter speed. Now with the shutter speed, it can vary depending on what you're trying to do. I find that if I'm out at blue hour, right after sunset, 1/100, 1/125 seems to work best. And I would say the same in an ambient light situation. However, if it's really dark and you can't see anything, even with your ISO cranked up, whatever, then I will bring my shutter speed down to 1/30 to 1/40. Now the downside to this is that it's going to make the the line for the drone light painting is going to make it really thick. So if you don't want it to be a really thick line, then I would not recommend doing this. Otherwise, if you don't care, do what you want. So now that we have the idea of the settings and our environment, let's go out in the field and fly. So now that we're back from the field, we're going to need one more thing plus a video editor in order to make this happen. And that one more thing is Kdenlive. So Kdenlive is what we use to make this light painting drone video effect. And the reason we use that is if I use Adobe products, and if I were to use an Adobe product, it might take days for it to make this effect, while it takes Kdenlive minutes. So that's why I use it. So what you're going to do is, and the link in the description below, you're going to be able to click on it and it's going to come up to this website. Now you want to make sure that you download 20.04.1 or earlier. Anything after that does not have the light graffiti effect, and that's what we need. So go ahead and download that at your leisure. And if you don't have a Windows computer, I have a solution later that we can use instead. So let's jump into Premiere. Now, once you drag and drop your footage into Premiere, you don't have to do a lot. You can do your coloring, all that sort of stuff, but what you do need to know is where the drone turns around for each point. Now, I did realize when I was doing this, because I did these points ahead of time, is that something that would be really useful is when you're watching the drone go through this, make a really loud noise. So that way, instead of having to scrub and try to find it, especially if your computer's a little glitchy or you just can't view it at a high rate, if you make a really loud noise, you can look at where the audio spikes, and that's where you know where to cut. So I'm going to go ahead and cut both of these. And we're doing this for the reason of that in Kdenlive, you cannot merge clips. And that's a problem because we want to basically just cut out the points on where the drone is just sitting there and not moving because we're uploading the next mission. So that's what we're cutting out here. So now that that's been cut out, I'm going to go ahead and export it. Just file export, your generic settings, whatever you want it to be. And then we're going to jump into Kdenlive after this. So now we're going to bring our footage into Kdenlive. Go ahead and drag and drop it into the project bin. I'm going to go ahead and drag it to our timeline. I don't need this audio, so I'm going to turn it off. And then you're going to want to click on Effects, click on the film strip up here, and then click on Miscellaneous, and we're going to scroll down till we find the light graffiti effect. We're going to go ahead, grab it, drag and drop. Then make sure you click on the video on the timeline. We have a couple options over here. So brightness threshold, it's going to determine is how bright does a pixel need to be in order to be recognized as a light source. So that's something you're going to play with. The other thing you're going to play with is sensitivity. And it's just basically saying for the slowly moving light source, try to use a lower sensitivity to obtain a better exposure. You're going to play with those, see what fits best for you. I generally bring this up a little bit, and I find it works well for me. Now say, for whatever reason, you're playing with this, just trying to see if it's going to work, and we see that we have this bright white sort of line in the sky that I don't want, because with Kdenlive, for whatever reason, if you want to do this light graffiti effect, you have to let it start from the beginning and go all the way to the end and let it play through it. Otherwise, when you export, it just won't work. Don't know why, it just doesn't work. So if you have this extra line and you don't want it, you're going to go ahead and bring dimming up and then press play on your spacebar on the keyboard and then press it again to get rid of it. Now bring dimming all the way down, and then once you play, it's going to go ahead and go through the process and you're going to get the light graffiti effect you want. Once it's been through the entire process and you see the shape on your screen, then what you're going to do is you're going to go to render, make sure that it's on MP4, it starts on WebM, MP4, go ahead and name it and put it wherever you want, and then click render to file. Once you do that, you'll probably have something that looks like this. If you don't have a Windows computer or you don't want to use Kdenlive, there is another option, and that is using your iPhone. There is an app on the App Store called Photor Gear that we're going to use. So jump into the App Store. We're going to go to the search bar and type in Photor Gear. It's going to pop up. You're going to click on the icon that is black and yellow the F&G icon and go ahead and open it. It is a free app. I already have it installed on my phone, so I'm going to go ahead and open that. You might run into some ads. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But so you can see my little setup here. And what we're going to do is you see the camera icon on the bottom left. You're going to click on that. So now it's video. So now what you're going to do is you're going to click on the 9 dots at the bottom right. And then you're going to go see lots of options here and you click on the off mode. That becomes light trail. So now we have our shutter speed, which generally I find it does a pretty good job. Don't bring it to 1/1. It just blows everything out and makes the phone super slow. Don't do it. Or do it if you want. I'm not going to tell you to live your life. Then from there, what you're going to do is you can adjust your ISO and your focus. The focus is going to be good if you want to make sure that you have, not a thick line. If it's out of focus, then it's going to be a thick line and your environment's going to look weird. But the thing that's really, really cool with this is with your ISO, when you go ahead and bring that up, because you can just move this by clicking on it and moving your finger, is that, say it's blue hour outside, right? And I set my ISO and I start my light painting. The environment will never change. It's in a normal video, right? You're going to see the brightness and the lightness. It's going to change over time. Not with this, which I think is really cool. So once you have it set up to the exposure you want, go ahead and click record, and it's going to make an awesome light painting. Here is an example of what I did the other day. And that is it for me, beautiful people. I hope you learned something. I'm really excited for what you're going to make. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and hit that little bell notification so you're notified whenever I make a new video. So thanks for hanging out, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.